now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say.
Notice once again, now it's back to $25,000 down payment assistance. So see how earlier in the debate, it was $25,000 tax credit. Now it's $25,000 down payment assistance again.
This issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those listening tonight, that's a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor.
But they don't tell you why. And this is the part that I wanted to mention. Aren't you glad you have me doing this? Okay. They don't tell you why we don't have enough affordable housing, right? And more so single family homes. That's because companies like Blackrock have bought a lot of single family homes. They renovate the houses, they jack up the price so that everyday common men and women can't afford them. Okay. So it's one thing to talk about and admit that the housing prices are too high. We all know that. Again, I feel like a lot of these politicians, they tell us things that we already know, but oftentimes they don't tell us the why. I had to tell you the why. So the $25,000 down payment assistance or tax credit, like I said, that's more of a class issue. I try to explain that to people. If your parents were homeowners and they lost their house in the '08 housing crisis, would you still qualify for that $25,000 tax payment or tax credit? Probably not, because you're not a first generation home buyer, right? See, this is where things get really tricky. This is why I don't like it when they means test things, because it's not your fault that your parents lost their home during the '08 housing crisis. It's not their fault either. These were predatory lenders that targeted, in particular, low income or middle income Black and brown families, also elders, basically stole their homes from them, right? So there's that. So Tim Walz needs to tell people the why. It's because of companies like Blackrock. Now, you probably can't do that because you have two former Blackrock execs that are part of Kamala Harris's team. So this is where you run into trouble with the corporate money. This is what I'm saying. If you're not corporately funded, it's easier to call out Blackrock. It's easier to say what I just said. But the ultimate goal should be to outlaw private equity from owning real estate, from owning housing. Until you do that, Blackrock is still going to continue to buy homes. So you can build as many houses that you want, but that's not going to stop BlackRock from buying more homes and jacking up the price. And if you don't fit that criteria that will include you to be a part of that $25,000 down payment or tax credit, you still have to deal with BlackRock. And neither one of them are getting to this. They're not getting to the core issue.
Your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising? And what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations.
No, you're wrong, JD. Both of you got this wrong. The number one reason is because of companies like BlackRock, who buy the homes. So if I buy a house next door to your house and I renovate it and I jack up the price to $700,000, what does that do to other housing in the neighborhood? That's going to help increase the value for your home. So then if you decide to sell your house, now all of a sudden your house is no longer worth $450,000. Now all of a sudden you might be able to sell your house for $600,000, even though I would look at it and probably say it's not worth that. That's how this works. You can see the same thing with gentrification. You see all these people that are forced out of their neighborhoods because all it takes is for a developer to come into a low-income community and build a luxury, condo complex. And all of a sudden that increases the property value and the property and the rent in that same neighborhood. So now your landlord can no longer charge you $1,500 for your apartment. They got to charge you $2,000. So until you tackle the problem with big money, until you tackle Larry Fink, who owns BlackRock, this is going to continue to be a problem. And you can continue to blame. And this is the thing with JD Vance, what he doesn't understand. The blaming of the working class. People like Larry Fink are sitting back and they're laughing at you. They're laughing and pointing their finger saying, ha, ha, ha. Because he has the working class fighting against each other. He has the immigrant community and he has American citizens that are part of the same working class fighting each other when he's the one pulling the strings. And that's exactly what they want to happen. So until you go after the big dog, you cannot sit up here and continue to blame the little puppies on the ground that have no control over what is happening above them.
Under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Illegal immigrants. So immigration is not increasing your housing costs. And I want to explain why. Typically, they are paying less. They're not paying more. It is the people, more so the professionals, that will move into the lower income neighborhoods that are slowly gentrifying, that are willing to pay more, that drives up the cost for you. This is what I've tried to explain to people over and over again. Harvard Square is a perfect example. The reason why it's so expensive to live in Harvard Square is because the Harvard law students will pay top price for rent, and the landlords know that. So that's why even if you're not in law school at Harvard, you're just a regular Joe Schmo who just wants to live in that area, you can't afford to live there because the law students are willing to pay $3,000, $4,000, whatever a month for an apartment. So we really got to think about that. And with the housing situation, particularly here in Massachusetts, they have taken migrants and they put them into emergency shelters. And some of them they brought to Martha's Vineyard. The rich white people at Martha's Vineyard said, can't stay here, even though it's vacant most of the year. So the governor had to take them from Martha's Vineyard and brought some to the Cape and brought some to Boston and different places, whatever. But that is something you always got to remember. So while we're pointing fingers at everybody else, you're not pointing fingers at Blackrock. You're not pointing fingers at State Street Corporation. You're not pointing fingers at Vanguard. Those are the people that are buying up all the developments. Those are the people that are like, okay, and yeah, we'll bring in a Whole Foods. And you know it's over after that. When Whole Foods come in, you know that's a wrap.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond.
I'm going to let him respond, and then we're going to have to stop it here because it's too much and it's already driving me crazy. This debate is racking my brain. Again, both of them are not tackling the core issue. Just because you build more housing, that doesn't stop Blackrock from buying up the housing that already exists. And I'm tired of people saying that we have a housing shortage. Most of the time, that is not the case. Most of the time, there is housing. But Blackrock bought it and made it unaffordable for you. So what needs to happen is that J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, they need to be going after people like Larry Fink. They need to go after those developers. They need to go after the investors. Now, Kamala Harris said she's going to take on corporate greed, but you're not calling this out? This is the easy part. This is so easy. It's so easy, man. I can walk down the street right now. Housing, 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 housing. There is housing. You just can't afford it. And that's the big problem. And this goes far beyond just giving people a living wage, because they'll give you a living wage and they'll still continue to increase the price to the point where you still can't afford it. Why are people in their 30s and 40s having to have roommates? What has happened to this country? Let's be real. My parents didn't have to do this. My parents are not college educated. My parents are on their second home with no college degree. My generation, those of us that have college degrees, still can't afford to buy a home. The only reason I was able to get a home was because during the pandemic, the interest rates dropped significantly. And a lot of people were moving out of Boston because they were like, we're under lockdown. No need for me to stay here. I can't do anything in the city anyway. So when people started to leave, the housing prices decreased. And so did the interest rates. And that's how I was able to get a home. I wouldn't be able to buy it today because now the prices jack back up. So they're not getting to the root cause, and they know it, but they're not saying it because their donors would have a problem with it. When you're taking money from the people who are causing the problem, it's kind of hard to call them out.
On to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not
migrants,
true. And again,
that
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's again blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm
sorry, I have to stop it there. He wants to talk about federal lands and protecting land. Tim Walz refused to stop Pipeline 3 from going through indigenous land. A lot of people don't call it out. A lot of people that support Kamala don't mention this. But I've spoken to people in Minnesota. We'll let it finish here.
On the fact on this, economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that.
And both of you, your time is up because I didn't had it. I've really had it. Like it's just oh my God. I will say again, I will give them credit for not making personal attacks towards each other. I think this was more constructive debate. They agreed more than I thought they would disagree. I was kind of surprised by that. But yeah, buddy, talk about like not getting to the root causes.